This is going to be a follow-up video on our unknown British shotgun here. Something I've been kind of cleaning up and reconditioning for a friend of mine. And I'd like to thank everybody for their comments and their input on what they thought this particular firearm was. Now, most people thought, and I think it's Manson or something was the name of the company. It's not that. Those were some high quality shotguns. And after a extensive search on the internet, just typing in phrases, British shotguns, British flintlock, single shot shotguns and that, and looking at the images, because I am not an expert on these particular guns from this particular time period, okay? But I would like to thank everyone for their input, their suggestions, and their comments on this. This helped get me a start and start looking, okay? Because actually, really, the finer details of this piece were covered in rust. And until I cleaned everything off, it wasn't quite evident what was going on here. So, like, I believe that this may have been a barrel from a much earlier firearm from like the 1700s, and then was added on with the short stock and the underrib and all this other stuff. Well, I really don't, that's not the case, I don't believe. Somebody did comment that the proof marks, which were Birmingham proof marks on the other side, the two little ones, from 1813 to 1855, okay, kind of giving us an idea of the date of the gun. The Birmingham proof marks still are kind of the same, or I found them in a book, but it was more modern. It went from the black powder cartridge era of the 1870s up to modern proof marks now. But Birmingham was there under England. And the JR here, anything with an R on a British proof is a reproof for black powder guns. I guess proofing and the laws and how it was pretty serious matter, especially when making these trade guns, as they were called. Companies were held accountable for not making substandard weapons, okay, and there was a whole system in there, but because it's marked London on the barrel, it must be a London reproof. I have found evidence of that in different types of symbols and that, but most of them will have a letter and an R. Okay, so part of that may be missing or maybe not. Okay, but I don't have reference material to something this old. So, I'm going to go with that this shotgun was put together, say, in a time period roughly, as a guess, 1813, 1855. Makes sense. And it was a flintlock, and I'll describe why, because somebody else also suggested something else too. I have found examples of this rifle, photographs of them that were put up for auction, that are configured this way. So we'll start by going through. We'll start with the buttstock here, this kind of fancy thing, steel. Most of these have the steel style buttstock on there. And the stock itself, I've seen several examples of guns stocked like this. The only curious thing about this gun is it has two wedges instead of just one. Okay. Now, this was a flintlock, and how I can tell is looking at the lock. There's a couple of these holes here where the spring in that for the frizzen was. So this was a flintlock. It was converted to a cap lock at some point in time, when I don't know. I've seen these stocks, there's several examples where I've seen guns with the same stock, same checkering, same trigger guard and that. And also, by the way, there is no pineapple on this trigger guard, but there is, it looks like a little starburst here and some more of the floral inscriptions. There was a name, and actually it's quite long. I tried to see it, to read. There is a name here on this lock, and looking at it you can tell it was a flintlock, okay? And it was converted, and that's probably why it's there, but there is a lengthy name down here. It's just been obliterated by rust and time, And I've seen several examples that have them little bands, be it gold or silver or grayish like that, on these guns. Also, the single screw, okay? Several examples of these shotguns, be it flintlock or percussion, have a single screw holding the lock on. And I found that kind of unusual, but they are. And again, some of the locks on some of them were shaped, especially the flintlocks were shaped different, but this has no evidence of being recontoured or filled in or having any other holes in there either. The flintlocks, like I said, some of them had a different shape, but this also has wear, where this gun was used for quite a while. The usual pitting and that here around where the flash hole was, that wear is there. So this gun got a lot of use. And they did have these barrels. Like I said, this is odd because of the two wedges, but I'll get back to that. And yes, I found them where this underrib was, I believe, soldered on. This doesn't look too neat. And where it's separated, you can see light underneath. I was looking to see if this was an older gun that had, I think they call them 10-ins, would be either soldered or dovetailed in, and then pins would hold the longer stock. It's not evident underneath there. Okay, there's nothing. So this, and I have seen examples where this underrib, exactly like this. Of course, this is not the proper ramrod. This is just a wooden stick they put in there to make it look good, but I've seen several examples like this. Now, what is curious is the way this is kind of soldered, welded, or something, like a huge lump in there. And also the same was down towards the chamber, because I did take this gun apart against my better judgment, because I had issues where this, we'll go back talking to this, these wedges here, okay, this front one had some sort of pin or something that was stuck. I finally got it loose, but then it was very loose. And the second one, curiously enough, when I did get this barrel off, and another thing, this is a wood screw down in there. When I got this off, it was a wood screw, which that's not a good thing. The breech plug had a notch, and that notch corresponds with this screw that goes through here. The notch kind of rests on the screw. This first wedge, underneath the barrel, there's like a very narrow slit or groove. Did not have the 10-yin or whatever you want to call it, the loop on the bottom of the barrel that the wedge goes through, and this was not inletted from one. So it's like this wedge goes into a small, shallow groove in the bottom of the barrel, much like a recoil lug. Now this one here did have, and again, this bar for where this wedge would go in was really terribly soldered on there, big globs of solder and that holding it on. And this was cut out for that to drop down into the stock and this to go in and lock it in. But the reason this whole area is cracked and shattered in that is there's movement. This isn't really it still moves now. This isn't tensioning it down like it should. And repeated firing has cracked all of this in here. The wood was shattered and the wood was quite dry. I ended up just getting some oil on this just to kind of soak into it and help the wood not dry rot or crack anymore. That's about it. So a lot of these things I was curious about, I found out are the way these guns were made. I've seen photographs of examples of them. One screw holding the lock on. This was kind of a flint lock, you know. I'm going to say why this separated over time, this rib underneath the barrel, and I've seen several examples that look identical to this. So I can say this is probably the original stock. This is the way the gun came in. Still kind of curious about the two wedges, but they look to be original and not something added on later or to a later thing. And this stock and everything does not show evidence of being refitted. And I've seen examples where they have the underrib and everything else on a single shot shotgun. That's another thing you have to specify. Single barrel shotgun, flintlock, and I found a few examples from different auctions that almost look identical to this. Okay, so it's pretty much that's what it is. So my conclusions, in my humble opinion, again, you know, I'm not an expert. We're going to go with the time frame of this. Probably this firearm was made sometime in the early 1813, say 1815 to 1850s. I'm not quite sure when the percussion cap was invented. I think 1830 something. And again, we use the term trade gun. Now you go back to the 1700s, you know, all smoothbores were basically your musket and your hunting shotgun. All of them were. And you go by the gauges. I think 69 is a 20 gauge and 75 was a 12. This being 624, I'm going to say this is probably a 24 gauge shotgun. And how you get the term gauge is the number of round lead balls that fit into the musket, whatever equals a pound. So 12 gauge would be 12 round balls equal 1 pound, would be a 12 gauge, 20 gauge, and this here probably would be 24 with the smaller balls. So I believe it's 24 gauge. Probably was made, and then somebody brought up the thing, these trade guns, these cheap shotguns were bought up by the fur trappers, 1840s, 1850s, to take out and trade for fur pelts from the Native Americans, okay? And also it's called the poor boy, you know, something like this. These companies may have made them up into the 1850s, 1860s, be it percussions or flints. And again, they were just inexpensive firearms that a lot of the local farmers and people that didn't have money would end up buying it. And like I said, my friend's family, they may have lived here. I know one guy brags that his family's lived here in North Carolina for 300 years, okay, back when they were colonists. All right, I don't know how far back his family goes. It's kind of a popular name, you see it around. So usually families like that have been here a very long time. There are several of them in the region. So I don't know. He said it was his great-grandfather, his gun, and he got it from his grandfather, okay, is the one that gave him this piece. So likely to say this is the way it was originally. Stock configuration, two wedges, the under rail running up, okay, holding it, and it was a flintlock, probably later on converted to a percussion lock. So very interesting gun. I don't think it is a top of the line gun maker, or from the quality of the soldering, which, you know, I don't know when it was done, or if the gun fell apart and was repaired over the years or whatever. But from the quality of the soldering and the fact you got a reproof on there, these are not probably the finest quality or the most fanciest or expensive guns available at that time. So unfortunately, a lot of people were talking about some high-end gun makers, and I looked at their items. I've seen pictures of that. They're very similar, okay, but obviously they were preserved better, something a lot better quality. And I've seen examples that are in rougher shape than this, that were percussions, that probably you're talking more of a low-end quality piece than, you know, one of the high-end respectable names out of London. All right, so that's my take on this, and that's the information I found. And I'd like to thank everyone for their help. And it kind of come out as a fairly common gun, you know, probably prior to the Civil War was brought here in those early 1800s. Or maybe they were just still making them, you know, past the Civil War, and would just offer them as a very budget-priced, simple firearm. You know, you never know. Can't say exactly. But thanks for your help. You know, hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. And, you know, I may have more of these older guns come up, and we'll take a look at them and have a little bit of a discussion. All right. Thank you.